Hamilton, in one of the interviews that I read with him, he was talking about how two of his mentors were Klaus Janson and Mike Kaluta. And I feel like you can see the Mike Kaluta influence too, for sure, in this beautiful illustrative approach that feels like almost like it's got like a Alphonse like Mucha sort of vibe to it, you know, like it's harkening back to more classic illustrators that just have a kind of a grace and an ephemeral quality that most comic superhero artists never possess. And welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Comics Rot Your Brain, the show where screenwriters talk about the comic books that we love, mostly from the 1980s. I'm one of your hosts. I'm Steven Bagatourian.
And I'm your other host, Chris Derrick. And before we start the show, if you haven't signed up to be a member of our channel, we have some fantastic bonus episodes and a forthcoming member-exclusive series of episodes in the works that you're all gonna love. And if you want to throw us a few bucks, we would very much appreciate it. So please sign up to be a member.
And Chris, we're talking about Blue Suit Aquaman today. Blue Suit Aquaman from the 80s. And he's got a whole bunch of seaweed on his uniform. And it's some awfully elegant, epic, lush artwork. And a hell of an interesting story here. 4-issue miniseries back when DC was throwing a whole lot of miniseries at the wall in the mid-80s.
Yeah. This is, I remember when this book came out. What's interesting when I was reading this book, and we'll get to it in a second, is that there was ads for, I've said this a couple times before, but there's just sort of readers know or listeners know, there was ads for the subscription for Dark Knight Returns.
Oh, yeah, I noticed that.
Yeah, it was maybe that was coming out within a couple months. So it was that same year. Which is, I guess, a year after Crisis. So that's sort of the time frame, like, for this.
And they were also advertising the other DC miniseries that we covered from that same era, the Dead Man miniseries, yes. Drawn by the great Jose Luis Garcia Lopez. You can check out that episode in our earlier catalog here, YouTube viewers. But yeah, today we're here to talk about Aquaman, and this 4-issue miniseries was written by the late, great Neal Pozner, and it was drawn by the incredibly unique Craig Hamilton. And to complete the rest of the credits here, I believe it was lettered by Bob Lapin, who I know most famously for lettering some of my favorite Justice League stories. JLI, the Bwahaha Justice League, was lettered by Bob Lapin, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, and don't forget, this book is inked by Steve Montano.
And we've got former EC Comics legend and at the time DC editorial stalwart Joe Orlando, picking up the duties of coloring the Aquaman miniseries, which I thought was really interesting too, because Joe Orlando is kind of a legend himself as an artist and an editor, and here he is just coloring a series that was written and drawn by two relative newbies. Like we were just talking about, Craig Hamilton was freaking 19 when he got hired to draw this series, and he was 20 by the time he completed it. Just mind-blowing for someone that young to be given the keys to a major flagship DC character and a redesign like this. I mean, that's just fucking, I can't even imagine. When you were 19, can you imagine just working on a major DC comic series like this?
No, absolutely not. I mean, it's interesting in the back of the second issue in the little text piece, which is written by Neal, and he's like, and he got a quote from Hamilton, and he's like, man, like 3 years ago, I couldn't draw comics, but now I can. And I'm reading that, and I'm like, how old is this? And then it says, oh, he's 20. I was like, wait, he was 16, 17 when he started drawing comics, and now he's like this good, and he's getting a big book. I mean, which I think there's something else that I thought was fascinating in that text piece was what Neal Pozner was saying about how this book came about, is that he was in the offices of the editorial DC, and they were talking about how come like Wonder Woman isn't as popular as Batman and Superman,
right?
And then he went and put together like a sales document that it was his theories on that, and if we could use this to kind of revamp like Wonder Woman, that's what they should do. And then Dick Giorgiano was like, I actually like this, so and then he was like, oh no, I'm not gonna do Wonder Woman. I think that's because this is around the time when George Perez was doing that revamp of her, so that's probably why, because he didn't mention who it was, but I think that's who it was.
Yeah.
And so then he was asked, well, is there someone else that you want to work on? And he was like, he thought about it, he said, I want to do Aquaman.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. You're right. And this text piece by him is a really fascinating kind of window into how this whole thing came about. And yeah, like you say, Pozner was not a writer at that time. He was a design director, I believe, for DC Comics. Yeah, he was doing the design for them on a whole bunch of stuff, like we were talking about before we started recording here. Pozner, he designed the logos for some major DC Comics, including Atari Force and Legion of Superheroes and Crisis on Infinite Earths. I mean, huge. Ronin, right? Oh my God, like amazing, like fantastic, legendary design work from Pozner. And we'll read a little bit more about his history later. He was legitimately a designer who came from outside of comics. He had designed album covers and theater. And I mean, he was a sophisticated design mind coming into the world of DC Comics at that time. And, we had this revival of comics happening, of course, in the 80s, as we always talk about at DC in this era. And I think someone like Pozner bringing that sophisticated design aesthetic to DC was so critical, just really amazing. And I think he's one of those unsung heroes that we love to talk about on our show from 80s comics, who sadly, he passed away very young and died an untimely death. And he, frankly, probably does not get the credit he deserves for the role he played behind the scenes at DC Comics. And, when you're doing design work and this kind of stuff where you're more in the shadows, people just don't talk about you as much. And this is his one and only writing credit, which apparently came about, as you said, by accident.
Well, I mean, the thing I like what you're saying about he doesn't get the credit and the design work, I think it's, I mean, obviously he's done some great logos. I think we talked about some other people who did like some of the logos for other books at Marvel. I can't remember. I think when we did the one for Cloak and Dagger, but there's sort of like this whole. I think part of what makes like particularly this comic, like if you look at this comics, like the first issue of this,
yeah.
And if you think about, like the way they do the 4-part like miniseries thing at the top, and I think there's this the design like elements and choices that these comics at this time did, because they weren't that loud. There's this little mid-'80s work.
Yeah.
The art wasn't that loud on the cover, but it was very like, but it was still, but it had a lot of impact. It penetrated your brain in a way that I think that especially like post this era, the books are a lot more like in your face and they're trying to fight for space on the on the rack shelf and everything like in the comic book store. But I think that, like I said, there's elegance to this. It's very sophisticated. And you just I think it's a really, I just think about not just this book but this time and all the books that are coming out at this time had something very unique to it. And guys like this and just don't get their due. They
do not. No, you're totally right. And the design. Yeah, it's critical. I mean, I think you and I talk about this all the time because we're both kind of design geeks in terms of movie posters and also comic books as well. And like, yeah, you see that Pozner's impact at DC, I think, was very consequential because DC was, I believe, in the 80s, leagues ahead of Marvel when it came to designing books that looked more like they were, proper, well-designed, objects of art. And you saw that more and more with books like Ronin and Dark Knight, and Neal Pozner, I think, behind the scenes was spearheading a lot of that. And even with a book like Aquaman, as you point out, Chris, this is a really well-designed book. From the Aquaman logo to the way the DC bullet sits, as it always does in the upper left corner, but the 4-part miniseries band across the top, and just the overall look of these covers, they do have a real elegance to them. I think that's the perfect word. And the covers are inked. We should mention this because it's no small thing. Every one of these 4 issues has a cover penciled by Craig Hamilton and inked by no less than P. Craig Russell. And that is kind of astonishing because these covers are beautiful. And I think that is due in no small part to P. Craig Russell's finishes, because at the time, as we said, Craig Hamilton was a young artist, 19, 20 years old, just getting his feet wet in comics with Aquaman, pardon the pun. But I think that someone like P. Craig Russell inking your pencils when you're 19 or 20, well, he's already just a phenomenal artist, and he probably had about 10 or 15 years on Hamilton, and P. Craig Russell already was just a legend in the making. And you can see the work on these covers is just gorgeous. And for my money, that first issue cover of this blue suit Aquaman is very iconic. Like
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? Like that, when you said, should we do this Aquaman miniseries? I immediately flashed on that cover in my brain. It has been, really genuinely stuck in my brain for decades since I first saw that. It's such a cool design for that costume, but that first issue cover really it grabs you, and the P. Craig Russell inks are beautiful. So yeah, this is it's a really interesting series overall. Like, we talked about it a little bit before we jumped on here. The first 3 issues take some time to kind of get going, but boy, issue four is a sight to behold. And Craig Hamilton's art seems like it's getting better and better with each issue, but issue 4 is a feast for the eyes. It's an extravaganza visual feast.
Yeah, I mean, like you were saying earlier, like, it feels sort of like J.H. Williams' work, but it predates that kind of like multi-layered, like the dual page spread that J.H. Williams is doing, probably 10 or 15 years later.
Oh,
right?
yeah, definitely.
Yeah, because this is 86, so I don't remember seeing like the ABC comics like that. Like, what was it? Like, that's late 90s, right? Early 2000s, the ABC books like that?
Oh, yeah. That was like 90s. Yeah. The Alan Moore, Prometheus stuff. Yeah, where J.H. Williams got super psychedelic. I think that was definitely like 90s. So at least a decade plus after this.
At least a decade. Yeah, recently. I bet the thing I told you offline that I want the readers to know, or listeners to know, if they don't know this, I was mentioning to you about the costume, like the original costume, like Aquaman's costume, which was one of the biggest things that Pozner was saying that he wanted to revamp somehow, is, like the orange shirts and the green pants. That's like prison garb for the Atlanteans. Like, they were saying there was like one issue that kind of like, I guess the miniseries from 89 kind of got more into that, like, background of why he has that. So I don't really know the answer to that, but I remember reading that somewhere or going, I want to know the story of that, but I never figured it out again, and I never hunted it down, and I didn't remember it until I'm looking at this, and I'm going, oh yeah, this is replacing that other costume. So
that's really interesting. I mean, prison garb. It's interesting because that classic Aquaman suit, the original suit, the orange and green one, the orange top. Yeah, it does kind of look a little bit prison style. Like, it looks like the kind of thing you could wear, in lockup.
But I think it's a wild thing because, I want to know the answer to this to a degree, because it's like he's talking about he's the king of the seas. He's the king. He was the former king of Atlantis. Is all this level of being like, like being royalty, and obviously his mom was an exile and stuff like this. But then he's still wearing this prison suit, so it has to be some sort of like he's making a statement, which, to the people in Atlantis, which I don't know the answer to that yet. But I found that to be more interesting. Because in issue 1, at the end, when he puts on this blue suit and he's like swimming out, because he can't show up, they can't recognize him because of some of the politics going on, and they go, oh well, who is that? Who's in that garb? But they don't recognize him at all because of the new suit that he's in, which I thought was kind of
the blue seaweed camo suit.
Yeah, which I think is a cool suit. I mean, I really like the design of the suit. I don't really know who came up with it. It doesn't say if someone came up with it or not.
Oh, it was actually interesting you say that. It was Neal Pozner himself. Neal Pozner designed the costume, and he handed off the design to Craig Hamilton, and then Craig Hamilton absolutely killed it drawing the suit. And I was reading an interview with Hamilton way after the fact. And Hamilton was saying that one thing he was proud of was that after Pozner designed it, that the only other person who was ever really able to draw that suit properly, Craig Hamilton said he felt was himself, and that no other artist had ever quite gotten the hang of drawing it, and that was probably part of the reason why DC 86 that suit pretty quickly, and it was gone within a couple of years. They had him back to his original suit, and I think this was just a very difficult costume to draw, and DC was like, all right, enough of that. We're going back to the easy suit.
Yeah, well, but I do remember, the one issue or the one miniseries that I want to say Peter David wrote it. I could be wrong, but the one miniseries where in the first issue he loses his hand when the piranhas bite it off.
Yeah,
he's wearing a suit that is like gray and blue. It's not as complicated as this,
right?
In terms of all the little like kelp designs and seaweed and stuff like that. But I think they did feel like that maybe there's something kind of cool about that. But you know what? It reminds me, you said about how difficult it is to draw. It's just like the suit, and they never did a revamp. Why weren't we talking about the suit for like Jack of Hearts? It's like,
oh yeah, that the Marvel character, yeah.
And people are like, fuck, man, just fuck that character because his suit's too hard.
Yeah.
I was like, come up with another one. Come up with another design. Shit, it's not like you can't. That's why the character doesn't show up.
I know, it's true. They're like, all right, the only artist that can ever draw that Jack of Hearts suit was George Freeman, who drew that miniseries, the Canadian comic artist, and he was a great artist. But God bless him, he was able to draw that suit. It's a tough one.
It's wild, man. I think it's so wild. It's like it makes me wonder about like how many characters just like didn't get their due because it was like your suit's hard to draw, or you don't like drawing your suit, or like I think that's like an interesting little thing where the artist's like, man, I gotta draw that shit. Oh man, I don't want to do that.
Yeah, no, totally. No, that's totally true.
Because it makes you think about like a simple suit, like the Flash's suit is just like, hey, I'm just gonna draw. You know how it's just the lightning boots and like the little thing on the ears, like that's kind of it, because there's nothing else in the. I guess the little, his suit is so simplified. There's like the little circle thing on the bottom, and the belt is like just lightning bolt. So it's not even like as an artist to draw that is so simple because he's not drawing like a belt, like a utility belt or some shit like that. It's just like it makes you wonder a lot now that I read about this. As a kid, you don't even think about that, but then you're like, fuck. Like doing this shit, so
wow. No, it's totally true. Okay, so we should probably get into like describing the story a little bit and just kind of touching on exactly what happens in the story of this Aquaman miniseries.
Right.
Now, I just wanted to see. We'll probably go back to the Pozner text page in a little bit and maybe see if there's any other details he can add. But if we look at just the first issue, basically, I mean, the first issue kind of opens with a bang in the very first issue, and we see there's some kind of like crazy chaos going on in the surface world, and it's being caused by Ocean Master. And it all happens really suddenly in this first issue. And Ocean Master is like a undersea bad guy in a purple costume. And turns out he is Arthur, aka Aquaman's brother. And he's wreaking havoc on the surface world. We're not sure why yet, but he kind of destroys the neighborhood that Aquaman lives in, kind of like I didn't totally understand it, but it's like Aquaman has like a human abode above ground somewhere, or like he destroys Aquaman's neighborhood in the first issue. Is that what happens? His human neighborhood when he's living above ground.
Yeah, I guess he lives in this place called New Venice, I think it was called.
Yeah.
It's I mean, his origin is what? I mean, like he grew up a lot on land before he
that's true. We find that out in issue 3. We get the expansive origin.
That's the origin, but it's interesting that he just has a place above ground because his wife Mira, she doesn't seem like she likes to kick it above ground, but I guess she knows like people. I mean, it just seems like not a place for her powers are so like she makes hard water. So why would you? But in any event, this place New Venice gets destroyed by Ocean Master. Something I will say, which is kind of interesting to me, I thought this. I guess this opening page of it blowing up, this like explosion ball, like it reminded me of like the explosion ball from Akira. You know, I was like, oh, I don't know when this came out in reference to that. I don't remember when that epic book came out, but I think it's around this time too. But I think this kind of like this, I don't know, reminded me of that. It's almost like a splash panel.
Yeah, that's funny. That's funny you say that, because that's page 3 of issue 1. And yeah, I actually found that to be quite a confusing page. I guess it's kind of a splash page, but then you turn the page and it's a double page spread with Aquaman and Mira, debuting in the series. So really, I guess the next page is the official splash page because it's got the credits. Yeah. But you're right. Yeah. It's kind of like a pre-splash splash page because it's almost a full page explosion. But I found it to be confusing just in the sense of like, I wasn't sure what the fuck had blown up. Is it like the entire waterfront? Like all those, like that little shop front or building front that we see?
Yeah.
Like that's all blown up? Okay, I guess. I mean, yeah, I think the storytelling definitely for me starts out a bit choppy in these early issues. I mean, no shade at Craig Hamilton. The freaking kid was 19 at the time. So I think a little choppy storytelling is to be forgiven. But yeah, there were definitely a few moments early on here where things looked a bit clunky or awkward, or the storytelling was confusing. And I had to kind of double back and be like, wait, what just happened? And so I was doing that quite a bit the first couple issues.
No, you're right. I think, but the one thing that's interesting about this is that it's like you have to have a little bit of knowledge of Aquaman's history, and to pick it, because there's not an origin issue.
Mm-mm.
We also don't do a lot of to kind of like. There's no like. They don't hold your hand into this in a way,
nope.
But they expect you to know a certain amount about it. I think the one thing about this that overall is a story that like I never realized, but again, it was in the text piece. They were saying that the Aquaman's sort of like the way he was kind of viewed by people was he was some hothead. He had some anger issues, right. And they just ran him out like. He has this, it's which I didn't know or understand or get. Like, oh, is that his main character trait that he's like?
I did not remember that, but now that you're saying that and they wrote that here, it does remind me when I first encountered Aquaman in comics right before this was in Justice League Detroit, where Aquaman was like the head of like the sort of ragtag crew of the Justice League Detroit that was all like the, third string kind of loser superheroes that, once all like Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman were gone. And that Aquaman, who is sort of like the father figure of the Detroit League, I remember he was portrayed as a hothead, and he was constantly, I think, like yelling at the crew, trying to keep everyone in line. So I think that was kind of supposed to be a dominant character trait with him around that time, but I don't know how far back that went. Like, I don't know if that was like a thing from the 60s also, because I do feel like if that was his thing, it was definitely not consistent. Like, I don't associate him as being a hothead when he was around Superman and Batman and back in the day.
No, but also I didn't read a lot of Justice League from the 70s, early 80s. I mean, like to me, like my more immediate kind of understanding of like these Atlanteans is really Aqualad from reading. I was such a huge fan of the Teen Titans.
Oh, sure.
I remember like the original version and then the George Perez version where he was only in there like a little bit. What's his name, Garth or something like that. Yeah. But I kind of felt like, I remember wanting to pick this book up because, for me, like Aquaman was just a character from the cartoons, not someone that I knew from the comics because I didn't read a lot of him. I didn't realize comics that had him in it, And I feel like it's an interesting thing because you get the sense of like he's not really like an interesting hero. Because of the way that they, and that's why they did this book to kind of boost his popularity and give him more nuance as a character, which I think ultimately they did at the end. In this, by the time we get to issue 4, we understand a lot more. I think issues 3 and 4 with his origin, and then what happens in the final issue, like, is very interesting in terms of like a psychological character journey, in a way that we don't get in a lot of hero books, I feel, from like at all. So
yeah, no, actually, now that you say that, I can't help but wonder what could have been with this series if they had started with the origin, early, because I feel like it was really that third issue for me that I kind of actually started to get more interested and more engaged with the story, because I think it was really choppy and kind of piecemeal up till that. And I feel like, honestly, Craig Hamilton's art starts to click into place and feel a bit more comfortable by that third issue as well. And once we get that origin of Aquaman and his brother and his father and his mom and the whole history of, his just his backstory and what it was like growing up, that was where the story started to make sense to me. The characters made sense to me. And then that fourth issue was just, like we say, it was beautiful to look at, and it was just kind of visually so spectacular. So I don't know. I think the series honestly does get off to a little bit of a slow start in a lot of ways, and they're kind of finding their sea legs, so to speak.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. I think you're right in a lot of levels, because the one thing that this comic does in the first two issues that it's sort of a comics trope, and I don't necessarily, I always find it a little odd, is that, this is Aquaman's book, he's not centered in the story in its 1 and 2.
No.
Like if he in issues 1, which would say, so his brother Orm, who's Ocean Master, he causes all this explosion and damage and stuff like that, and he has a big fight, and it's more about like what Ocean Master is making him to do. Like he's so reactive as a character, and the plane and everything is more about what Ocean Master wants to do, and then we cut to Atlantis, and King Volko is more about what's up with Volko and the problems he's dealing with, and all this kind of stuff. And and then Aquaman gets dragged in there, and he's like, "Yeah, man, you got to do this." He's like, "What? I got to do what?" You have to find the seal, the great seal of Atlantis, for at least like our city's been missing. So go find it. And it's still like he doesn't have any kind of his agency is so diminished.
It is. And by the end of the first issue, he's literally chained up in this magical city, this magical underwater city. He's gone searching for this missing Atlantean seal, like you said, and he was sent off on this mission, and then he gets trapped, and he's in a dungeon at the end of issue 1. And it's he doesn't really have that much to do, and he's kind of getting thrown around a lot these first couple of issues.
But the woman, the woman with the silver arm, I can't pronounce her name. It's like Nuada or something like that.
Yeah.
She's got more like story focus.
Mm-hmm.
In this first issue, it's like this battle between her and her sister, and and they're kind of like their battle for the throne. And there's a lot of that in the second issue too. Like when they're in that arena, it's more about what they're about. I'm just kind of I've seen this a lot in comics where they kind of do this, where the hero doesn't have a lot to do because they're kind of giving us a lot of exposition.
Yep.
Or these other characters are getting more, just getting more story weights,
Oh yeah, yeah, totally. No, you're right. Because in this underwater sort of magical city, which is called Thierna Naog, this other character with the iron or the metallic looking arm, her name is Nuada Silverhand, which is kind of a charmingly literal name for her. She's being yelled at by her sister? It's funny. Okay, so they're like warring sisters, kind of like to match our warring brothers with Aquaman and Orm. But yeah, in this kingdom, they have kings who are women, and they're at battle with each other, and so then Aquaman, magic battles, and Aquaman links up with Nuada Silverhand. By the end of the first issue, he's in a dungeon, imprisoned next to her, and it's kind of going to lead us into the second issue. And before we leave the first issue, I want to make a minor correction. I had mentioned the beautiful inking by P. Craig Russell on the covers, and I noticed that P. Craig Russell had signed, I think, the covers for issue 2, 3, and 4, but I'm looking at that iconic cover for the first issue, and now that I look more closely at that first issue, the only name that I see in the signature is actually Craig Hamilton. So I just want to give Craig Hamilton the props. If he penciled and inked that cover for the first issue, which it looks like he in fact may have done, and now that I look at the inks more closely, it actually does not look like P. Craig Russell. Props to Craig Hamilton, because I think he did that first issue cover, the penciling and inking, all by himself, and it's fantastic. So yeah, really great cover by him. And then P. Craig Russell comes in and just kills it on the rest of the covers. But I just wanted to note that for the record.
Now, here's the thing I think interesting about this cover, though. All these images in the cover, they're pulled from the comics, like they're from the series. So like he had issues like 1, 2, and 3 penciled by the time they did this cover for issue 1. Because
that's interesting. The background images, you mean? Yeah,
the background images are, because I've now I'm looking at it now because I didn't think about it when I first saw it, because I just like, that's cool. But now I'm looking at it again now, review. It's like, oh no, these are like that image between Silverhand and her sister yelling at each other. Like that's from issue 2, and then the thing with Volko, right, is issue 3, and then those green guys are again from issue 2. So maybe just had like issues 1 and 2 like painted.
Yeah, that's actually kind of fascinating. Yeah, it's interesting. I wonder, do you think, is it direct pulls from panels? Like, is he actually grabbing actual panels, or is he just kind of interpreting these moments like with new drawings?
I think. Well, I think so the one thing of Ocean Master in the lower right, isn't that the same image as at the end of issue 2, issue 3, at the final issue?
Let's investigate that. That would be interesting if it was.
And I also know that this thing with the girl, the sister, that's in like the middle, like just below like Aquaman's bicep, on his left bicep, that is from issue 2. That's the sister like screaming at, and those guys who are green with the little hammers,
right?
Like, I feel like, and then this thing here with Aquaman holding the guy up by Aquaman holding up like Orm by the lapels. Let me see if I can find that.
Okay, I'm looking at the Ocean Master image. I think the one you're thinking of is at the end of issue 3. It's a close up on his face looking evil. It is a different drawing.
Okay.
It's a different drawing. It is similar, but it's a little bit more at a 3/4 angle, and the one on the cover looks even more sinister.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it is similar, though. I think he's interpreting moments from the various issues, but you're right. He's interpreting very specific moments with very similar sort of imagery. But it's an interesting choice. But yeah, he's giving you kind of this sort of like a montage effect of the whole series behind the iconic Aquaman in the new suit swimming across. It's like he's swimming across the whole story, so to speak.
Yeah, and it's cool because when you look at it,
it's a really smart cover.
Because when you look at it originally, you haven't seen the rest of the story, so you don't know what that is.
Right.
You have no idea. So.
Yeah, it just conveys a certain density and breadth of storytelling immediately. And I mean, it's pretty cool. It shows you there's a lot going on in this story just at a glance.
You know what? I will say page 11, when they're like looking at the whole town burned down, the last big panel. I think that's kind of a really cool composition. I like that.
Are you still in the first issue?
First issue, yeah. I also like the one on page 9 when when Orm is choking him and there's like the little blood coming out of his mouth.
Oh yeah, that was actually a really good panel. Yes,
that's a really cool panel. Yeah, that's really.
Yeah,
cool
there's some great moments. I mean, really great moments. I don't mean to shit on the art too much in the first couple of issues, because there's some beautiful panels, as everyone's going to be seeing in our video while they listen to this. There's some beautiful panels, but there's also some pretty awkward looking panels. Like if you look at a lot of the civilians that are getting fucked up in the community here, like a lot of the civilians kind of like tripping and falling over the water and getting like the one, like a little girl, like look at the page with Mira. Right after that bloody page where he's fighting Orm, which looks pretty cool. That page with Mira where she's using her powers and there's like the little girl coming down a water slide holding a doll.
Yeah.
Like that looks pretty awkward. like that image right there, I was like, what the fuck are we doing here? Like that looks pretty awkward. And so there's a lot of inconsistency in these early pages that I think is just a mark of probably a 19-year-old artist struggling to meet a deadline for the first time. And he's obviously super talented, but like the work's inconsistent at first until he kind of, until he gets a hang of what he's doing a little later. And I read in some interview, he said it took him 8 months to draw these 4 issues. So, he was just getting the hang of drawing comics, obviously. And I mean, he did an amazing job for a first comic at that age. Really super talented artist for sure.
Absolutely. I mean, I think overall though, just like some of his like, like the compositions are really cool, panel to panel, even though he might not have like the actual kind of like gesturing down
Yeah.
right. So no, he's really good. He's really good, and I think this is a thing. Oh, I mean, again, like it's inconsistent because some of it is like brilliant, some of it's like good, some of
Yeah.
it like okay, you need a little work here, but yeah, but overall, I mean, this guy's art is really good. It's painted, it's colored really well. What I like about what he does too, which is interesting, I guess a little difficult, is he's got to draw all this underwater stuff, so he's got to kind of draw like like the motion lines of him cutting through water, which is kind of like, what's this page 14 is
Yeah.
like, it almost feels like speed lines in like a manga,
Oh
right?
yeah,
But
yeah. He does a great job. I'm glad you said that, Chris. I feel like Craig Hamilton really shines with the underwater scenes.
yeah,
I think he loves drawing the underwater stuff. That page 14 is beautiful. Like all the images of Aquaman on that page, particularly the one at the bottom of page 14, where like
yeah,
he's arcing downwards and you see him kind of with the fish behind him and his arms behind him. Like that's
yeah,
a beautiful full body shot of Aquaman. Like that's just like
so, yeah, amazing.
incredible like figure work. I mean, really mature, kind of like really brilliant, like beautiful comic book work. The kind of work you just didn't see in superhero comics very often. It really does have a grace and a fluidity to it that's really impressive.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah, so really, I mean, you could see why he was picked for this. And he draws great undersea life. He draws mean seahorse. He draws great octopi and fish. Like, he's definitely putting a lot of love into the sea creatures, which I appreciate. I mean, Craig Hamilton, clearly a major talent. I wish he had hung around in comics for longer, but I think the deadlines and a lot of the stuff just doing regular comics is, it's obviously not for everyone.
It's not. It was as we learn from other people. It's a really tough gig.
Yeah, particularly if
Really,
you've got this kind of a detail intensive style and we see that this guy's a super detailed artist and I mean brilliant, but how do you do this on a mainstream company deadline? It's really hard to do. Craig Hamilton did continue to work on some comics and there's kind of a famous unfinished book he worked on that was a Peter Pan comic called Losing Neverland. I'll text you some of the images from it here in a second, but like it's astonishing. Like it's this gorgeous looking comic that he was working on and it was never finished, but some of the pages popped up online and they're staggering. Like they're gorgeous looking comic pages and I think he never finished it, but it's one of those kind of great unfinished comics and just it's so labor intensive to draw in this kind of a style that you can understand why it would just be backbreaking for an artist drawing like a major storyline.
yeah, because it makes you think. It's like I think like part of the skill of being a comic artist is not just being able to like do the sequentials and control the anatomy, control the perspective. You have to develop like a workflow
Yeah.
that allows you to do all that and do it so you're not spending like 70 or 80 100 hours a week at the drawing table,
Yeah.
because obviously guys like like Miller and Byrne and Perez, and like Bob Layton, like those, and Neil Adams, like they figure out a way to be like expressive like this, even like fucking like Tom McFarlane, and do it on a monthly basis. They had to have some little technique that some people just don't get. Some people don't like the way they learn to draw like doesn't is not that conducive. They can be great at it, but it's like, man, like you said, to hit those deadlines.
Yeah, no, totally. It's true. I remember hearing Todd McFarlane talk about this early in his career, just toward what you're saying. And he was saying, like, oh, yeah, everybody loved fucking Michael Golden and Arthur Adams so much. And McFarlane was like, I knew I was nowhere near as good as those guys, but I thought if I could draw like, 50% as good as those guys plus hit monthly deadlines that it would scratch an itch for some people, and I think he was right because he was close enough to Art Adams or close enough to Michael Golden, but yeah, McFarlane could actually do a monthly book which those other guys could never maintain for any length of
Yeah,
time.
yeah, not for a long, but yeah, like Arthur Adams, like there's very few Arthur Adams like monthly. I mean, he did some of those, but it was like the runs were short, you know.
Oh
Like
yeah. And same with Golden. I mean, with Michael Golden, you had like the Nom and Doctor Strange for a little bit, but no multi-year runs. You couldn't do it with a style like that.
Didn't he do
Micronauts famously. And that was like, Micronauts was probably his most major run. I think that was probably the longest run he had. And then the Nom, but he wasn't somebody like McFarlane who was going to do like 50 issues or 60 issues on one character.
Yeah, and also the thing about like his Doctor Strange run, and I don't know if this is like this with, I don't know if this is Micronauts, but I know with his Doctor Strange run, that was when like Strange was like a bi-monthly book. So he had 2 months to do.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah. All right, so let's jump to issue 2.
Yes, number 2.
So issue 2 is that we start seeing what Orm is doing. He's going around to all these ruined cities. There are already these lost cities underwater. He's collecting these crystals, which was sort of like played up a little bit in the opening 2 pages of issue 1 about history of Atlantis and how it fell. And so basically there's these 12 crystals that are sort of like the Zodiac crystals, but they have power. And I guess they were used by the guy like Orion when Orion fought, like was a warlord or something like that. I
think it's Aryan, or I don't know, Aryan. I never know how to pronounce that guy's name, but it's like the DC character who's from Atlantis that Paul Kupperberg and Jan Duursema did his series.
Yeah, like in the past.
Yeah.
And so that's like, so that's where these crystals come from, and he's collecting them from, and he's gaining power from collecting these crystals.
Yeah, and you're talking about Orm, who is Aquaman's brother, aka Orm is Ocean Master.
Yeah, which is that's the first page of this page. The rest of it is Aquaman he's in this prison, and it's interesting because it's like he has never been. He doesn't know a lot of these other undersea kingdoms, right? And this place that this woman he's with is like they use magic, and he's like, I never like used magic, so he can't break the bonds. It's kind of a cool, it's tough for him, and I kind of like it's weird that he wears himself out. So when they finally bring him to the arena, he's like physically exhausted.
Yeah. Honestly, like Aquaman comes across as kind of dopey in these first couple of issues. Like he doesn't really know much about what's going on, and he's kind of arrogant. And like he's in the dungeon. He's like, flimsy manacles like these to hold me. Where am I that they don't know of my strength? And then it's like, he's tugging on the manacles. That tug should have been enough to shatter these links. There's more here than appears. Still, it shouldn't take too much of an effort to get this job done. And he's like, and he's like screaming. And then he says, whew, I can't even bend these shackles. So yeah, he doesn't seem like he's the smartest or most strategic Atlantean lord at this moment.
Not at all.
Yeah.
I think it's, but I will tell you, what page is this? Page 3, top right-hand panel. That says like that where it says this tug should have been enough to shatter. That's a great portrait of his face.
Oh yeah. Oh, the top. This tug should have been. Oh yeah, that is. Yeah, no, I mean, I think in these first couple of issues, you do get these great moments sprinkled all throughout like that visually.
Yeah, it's so good. Some of it's like startlingly good.
Yeah. Totally.
And then for the next 4 or 5 pages, it's all this kind of like infighting between the like with like Nuada and her sister, and then they get brought to this arena because there's like this missing. So you're reading this and you realize what's happening, and you're like, oh, this is one of those things where it's like, this is again where I think this is where comics get a little soft, where it's like like we the reader are too far ahead of the characters. Because we know, Orm is hunting for these crystals, and these people in Atlantis and here, they're talking about, well, the stuff we've had for centuries is lost. It's like, so then we know those are crystals too, that mean, and it's like, so it's kind of like the dramatic tension is sort of pulled out from here from the reader because we know like just more than the characters do, and you know, and tonight they gotta like fight and deal with these people in like this arena, which is kind of cool, but it's not. But it feels like it's. I think what you're saying before about if the origin story happened in the beginning.
Yeah.
I think that battle with Ocean Master and Aquaman in the beginning, when they first start fighting, I think is a better way to do the story. And then that way, that little change into the blue suit or whatever all that is more maybe the last few pages of issue 1 and then more of issue 2, because I feel like we have a better understanding of what Ocean Master is trying to do. And obviously, you know, I don't know if the readers, again, like, you know, like how much do we know about Aquaman's backstory if you're picking this up for the first time, you know, because to me, this is, again, I guess this is my first Aquaman story that I read at the time this came out. I don't know anything about who's Ocean Master. I remember his main villain was really Black Manta, right?
Yeah,
so I was,
right.
Oh, who's this person? Oh, it's his brother? Oh, that's interesting, because is there another superhero who fights his brother? I don't know if there is one, you know? So I feel like they kind of like, they never really gave Ocean Master and Aquaman the right due if that's really their origin.
Mm-hmm. No, it's totally true, because you've got this brilliant family dynamic that's kind of Shakespearean that you could really take advantage of. And I think Pozner is, you know, he is doing that to some extent. It does just feel like the storytelling could have been sort of organized a bit more effectively, where if you kind of rearrange some of these events, you could have built up to that blue suit and the unveiling of it, and you could have known more about the familial history so that all this had more weight to it. I feel like there's a great story in here. And right now it's mainly kind of parceled into those 3rd and 4th issues. And these first couple issues feel like a bit of a false start here and there. There's interesting stuff, beautiful moments, but it does feel like it's a little tough to imagine this holding the attention of a new reader in some ways. But then there's also a weird moment here. I'm just looking at where Ocean Master appears in issue 2, the top of page 7. Maybe you could explain this to me, Chris. When we're at the lighthouse where it says Maine, okay. Right. And then the lighthouse there's like an explosion and the lighthouse is gone. And then Orm appears and he says, I never could stand this room. This was his room. He used to sit here all night by himself carving those damn figures. Okay, so Orm has destroyed this house that was like their childhood home, which was a lighthouse on the ocean here. Okay. Now, what I'm confused about is what is going on with Ocean Master, aka Orm's legs in panel 3? Is he like materializing for the first time? Okay, so he's materializing, but his legs are kind of lagging. His legs have not quite materialized yet.
Well, yes, I think that, but I also think that maybe this could be a coloring mistake.
That's what I was wondering. It looks to me like the colorist didn't understand that those were legs, because if you look at the line art has like legs there that are just they're colored the same color as the cape and the clouds.
Yeah.
So like what? Like Joe Orlando, what the frick are we doing there? Like,
I mean, but if you look at the next panel, like, sure, his pants are the same color as the interior of the cloak. But you're right, the thing with the clouds, I mean, and look, and I think he is materializing in, because we find out later on that he does have this ability to like kind of like.
Okay, so maybe that's intentional, that his leg, the line art is there for half of his legs, but we see the clouds instead. Like,
okay, but see, to really have done it right from what we know from other kind of comics, if you're materializing in like that, then those lines of his legs where it's in the clouds, those should be dotted lines, you know, or dash lines.
Or they should like
solid yet, you know, like
they should be like white or something. Yeah, there should be some sort of differentiation in that line work there.
Yeah.
It's a little odd. Anyways, I just kind of bumped on that.
Well, but once again, like this kind of like, this is where the origin story, it not being coming so late, like he's like, oh, this is where he used to sit by himself and carve those damn figurines. To me, I'm like, is he talking about this is what Aquaman did when he was a kid?
Yeah. Or like his father or what? Yeah, it's like you don't know.
What? His father
Right.
was carving. We used to carve that. Used
Right.
to carve wood. So again, it's like that's like a little, we've harped on it a little bit, but it's like, but it's because of a problem. See, now here it is again at the bottom of that page, right? In the second to last panel before he leaves, before it all explodes, you can see again the way it's colored. He's, it's colored like the background, the top.
Right. He's dematerializing apparently. Okay, yeah. So I guess this is some kind of an effect they're going for, but I feel like it's done in kind of a slipshod way where it's like it's not really well thought out, and it just it's not landing. So yeah, but again, if we go back one page before that, there's actually a brilliant giant panel of some of these women from this magical village, the magical underwater city. And that's a beautiful panel that takes up like half the page with this character saying, so your hatred has finally reached the point where you ally yourselves with aliens to overthrow me, has its sister. I mean, and the figure work on that evil sister looks gorgeous. Like that's right. That's like beautiful body language, beautiful costuming. I mean, that's a brilliant panel. So it's what we're talking about with the Craig Hamilton work here. It's like brilliant, confusing, brilliant, kind of wonky, and that's, it's fine, it's fine, but it's just, it's all part of like these first couple of issues, I think, where they're both, Pozner and Hamilton are getting their hands around the story. And once they get going, I mean, I really do think issues 3 and 4 are significantly better.
Well, see, I think the thing you're saying about this thing with him like he's materializing in, it's like those solutions that are like obviously like, oh, like you could do the little you could do it in the inking, or you could do it in the way you color it, so it's kind of like it's sort of broken up. But that's more like that's me with like with like 30-40 years of comic comic foundational knowledge of reading comics for that long,
right?
And this guy's 20.
Oh, totally. You're right.
So I'm kind of you can look at all these guys and it's like, oh, you haven't learned a certain amount of you haven't learned tricks yet. There's just tricks you would learn to do this right, and we can't fault him because he's only 20, but he's so great.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. 100%.
So, but it's just one of those things where you're like, oh, dude, if you had like if you did this in 5 years, it still might look the same, but you'd solve certain issues. I think you would solve certain problems differently.
Oh, totally, man. I mean, I have no doubt. If Craig Hamilton had been able to stay in comics and had figured out a way, like you say, to sort of shortcut part of his style and figure out a way, or, if the industry was at a point where he could have just done, special projects and like limited series and, one shots, I feel like he could have been a superstar artist, like an Arthur Adams, like somebody who came in and just did these smaller works without the deadline pressure, because Hamilton's obviously a huge talent. And when you see some of that unpublished Peter Pan work, you'll see what I mean. It's like Hamilton, in one of the interviews that I read with him, he was talking about how two of his mentors were Klaus Janson and Mike Kaluta. And I feel like you can see the Mike Kaluta influence too, for sure, in this beautiful illustrative approach that feels like almost like it's got like a Alphonse like Mucha sort of vibe to it, like it's like it's harkening back to more classic illustrators that just have a kind of a grace and an ephemeral quality that most comic superhero artists never possess. It's sort of like what we talked about with Steve Rude when we did our Nexus episode, how Steve Rude has that kind of lyrical, musical, just beautiful grace to his work. And I think Hamilton is another artist like that, like Kaluta, like Rude, like the aforementioned P. Craig Russell. And these guys were bringing a rare level of grace to superhero comics. And that's just not a vibe you hear associated with superhero art very often, like graceful, elegant. I mean, it was a new lane in superhero comics. I mean, it had existed before. Like there were guys way back in the day, like in the 50s, there was like Lou Fine, and then later Gil Kane in like the 70s. Guys like Lou Fine, Gil Kane, these were very elegant superhero artists, but that was always an extremely narrow lane in comics, because most superhero artists are more like aggressive, like very like male archetypal traditional energy, but these guys were coming into comics drawing beautiful images, and we didn't really see that much of it. It's part of why I love Kaluta so much, and I know you love Kaluta. It's just you bring so much beauty to everything.
See, because you mentioned Kaluta now, and I was thinking about that, and because I kept looking at the signatures, I was like, oh, that's not Kaluta, that's not, but it feels like him, but it's not him. But this, I'm looking at this page of page 9 where they're going into his memory and pulling out all the little stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Great fucking image.
Mm-hmm.
But it sort of reminds me of around this time, I think that Kaluta, I never forget this. There was a hardcover reprint of Kaluta's 70s, the Shadow stuff he did for DC. And that was my first exposure to Kaluta. And I was like, this guy's a fucking genius artist.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
And I was kind of like, this guy did comics? Like, what happened to this guy? And I didn't, again, I'm like, whatever, 12, 13, you don't know the grind. And you think, well, these guys the books are coming out, so these guys can just do it on the schedule. Like you don't think about the real work you got to do to make this stuff work and also make it look that good.
Oh my God. Yeah. To get that intricate, delicate line work like a Kaluta. Yeah. I mean, how the hell are you going to do that on a monthly book? It's impossible.
He did it for that. I guess that Shadow thing was only 6 issues, something like that. I don't know.
Wait, which? Oh, the Shadow. Yeah. Shadow. He was on for 6 issues. Yeah.
So it wasn't a long one. That's why that little reprint was a really interesting kind of hardback. He obviously he did a lot of that other great stuff. But you're right. I mean, it's again this thing on page 9, where you see the way Ocean Master and then Mira blends in, and then you see Black Manta in the background a little bit. Mm-hmm. Then you see the Justice League players Vibe and Vixen.
Yeah.
It's kind of that feels like what a Kaluta type of thing would do, the way that's designed.
No, totally. No, these next couple pages definitely have Kaluta vibes. I mean, even with the next page, I could see a little Jim Steranko in just this really innovative page design, where it's actually kind of brilliant what he's doing on the next page too, where Aquaman's screaming face actually becomes the container for 4 diagonal panels that are emerging from his screaming face. I don't even know if I've ever seen an effect quite like that. That's a very original panel construction. And for a 19 or 20-year-old kid to draw a panel composition like that is fucking brilliant. I mean, that's an amazing looking page right there, actually. Now, the more I look at that, that's super impressive.
Well, what's really cool is when he's screaming, it's the way that the teeth are.
Oh, you're right. Yeah, you get a great angle on the teeth, that you don't normally see. It's almost like a 3/4 view of the teeth you can see behind them.
I mean, there's also individual teeth, whereas a lot of times they'll just do the mouth. It's just short.
yeah, unitooth.
Yeah, it's okay, but I mean, it's really fantastic. Kind of he's really good.
No, he's terrific. He's definitely really shining in some places. And I gotta say, I like the design of who he's fighting in the Coliseum here, who Aquaman has to fight in this Coliseum kind of gladiator style. It's the character who's on the cover of issue number 2 fighting him. And right. I forget the name, or they say the name here, obviously, but it's a genuinely creepy looking, just giant fish shark character. Forgive me, I don't know what kind of fish he's supposed to be, but he's a fucking creepy looking, fish monster.
Well, so to give you the viewers a kind of how are you listening to it? It's sort of like a centaur, but as opposed to a horse, it's like a fish. It's like a shark, But then again, the head is not a human head; it is a shark head. But it's sort of more anthropomorphic than than what's his killer shark?
Yeah,
is that his
he's
name?
even got antenna. At least on the cover, he has antenna that look almost like insectoid.
Yeah, weird. Well, you see that too in these 2 pages on page 13 or something like that. But it's almost like those how if you look at this web pages, is it page 12? I don't know. The next page, okay, it was page 13, right? Page 13, there's that little when you see the large shot of the Coliseum and Aquaman's been thrown in it, and he's on the one side, he's all white, but on the right you see the profile silhouette of this creature, whatever his name is, Srang or something like that. That with those teeth and those eyes and the antenna, that looks like one of those creatures that are from so deep on the bottom of the ocean. They have they glow.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Yes. Yeah.
Antenna, like kind of like there's the bioluminescence
Mm-hmm.
stuff like that. Like it's a really like clever, like scary
Yeah,
design.
really good design. I mean, if you told me design like a creepy giant fish shark, to fight Aquaman here, like, I mean, it's kind of a tough assignment, but Craig Hamilton kills it. That's a really, really cool design.
It's
So
really
yeah,
cool.
yeah, props to Craig Hamilton here. He's really coming through with some very innovative, very original solutions. And I saw in that Hamilton interview, one of the ones I looked at, he talked about how he was very influenced by underground comics, even as a young man, and kind of more weirder comics. And he was trying to bring like a weirder energy to the mainstream. And I think he succeeded here because, like, from the compositions, the panel layouts to the page designs, this gets weirder and weirder. And in that interview, he was talking about how he was very proud that by the time he got to issue 4, that the book looked so unusual, and that how he had started off drawing a somewhat conventional style superhero book, but by issue 4, he really wanted to push it, and he did that. So, they tremendously covered ground in this 4 issues. Like, the series kind of like it bit off a lot. And I think by the time we get to the end of it, we see kind of their ambition sort of like really just
it pays off.
Yeah, it pays off. Thank you. Yeah, exactly. It pays off. We see it all coming to bear, all these pieces that they're trying to put together early. But yeah, so I don't know, like he fights the guy in the Coliseum, and then he realizes the guy he's fighting is actually being enslaved and controlled by the magic wielders. But then Aquaman realizes, hey, this guy's a giant fish. I can talk to fish, and I can kind of mind control fish myself. So let me just see if I can free him from, their control. And he does that, and then his foe becomes his ally.
Yeah, which is great. Mm-hmm. Which is a great like little twist in the story. And then Aquaman, the foe like destroys the Coliseum, and then the Aquaman escapes with the woman named Nuada, and they and they swim off. They they just disappear. I mean, they escape, and then he uses like a sword. Is that a swordfish? I guess it's not a swordfish. I guess it is a swordfish, and he uses that swordfish that he commands, to as their little like getaway.
Oh, it's like their transport vehicle.
Getaway car. And then you cut to that panel again. It's these guys in green, and you see like Ocean Master is like, like they're worshiping him.
Oh, yeah, that's right. These the green dudes are like his minions.
Yeah, which it's just and then she realizes what's happening. Oh, okay, I understand. The royal seal is similar to our little. It has some name. It's called the like.
Yeah. It's basically they have their equivalent of the royal seal.
Yes, it's called like the Leah Fail, and it uses her magic to kind of like is whatever. Like, oh, you know what? Like my magic is something we can use to trace like where this is, and they trace it off to Orm's little like he's got some. It's like it was to these guys in green. It's sort of like his little base, or not his Fortress of Solitude, but it's like his little base. And then Aquaman and the girl Nuada get attacked, and they get overwhelmed, and and their magic can't hold off the numbers. And again, it's a bunch of really cool like underwater fight stuff, where again Craig Hamilton kind of excels at what's the way he's able to do this. Just like he's a smart guy for a kid, man. He's doing a lot of great work. And then eventually that's when Orm shows up, and Aquaman gets hit in the back of his head, and he's like, I got you. Mm-hmm. You're done. I'm going to take you to my kind of like, there's a great, what I love this panel here? I didn't notice that first, but I love it now. This last panel in issue 2 where it says next, Orm's scheme, right? If you go down to the bottom and you see like the green guys are like swinging their axes.
Yeah.
But you see like the silver arm of Nuada is kind of hanging in there. You see like Aquaman's arm, like they're so beat down you can't really see them.
Oh, I'm glad you said that. I was confused by that before because you're right. It's clearly Nuada's silver arm or her silver hand right there because it's glimmering and there's a shine on it. When I initially saw that, Chris, I thought that was Aquaman's other arm. And I was staring at that for like 30 seconds, and I was like, "How the fuck are his arms so mangled that they're this this far splayed apart. Like, where is this man's torso? Where is his head? Because the rest of it's in shadows. Okay, what you're saying makes way more sense. That's clearly Nuada's silver arm, and then Aquaman's arm next to it, but they're both just in the shadows, knocked out.
Yeah, it's cool. It's
really cool. It's a cool design. Yeah, that's like, very cool stuff he's doing there. I mean, yeah, very, very, beautiful kind of storytelling solutions by Craig Hamilton. And actually, this is a good moment since we're hitting the big text page at the end of issue 2. There's a couple paragraphs here where Pozner talks about Craig Hamilton and kind of bringing him on board as artist that I just want to read here briefly. And Okay, and Pozner also talks about what it was like to go from being a designer and an artist himself to being a writer for the first time after Dick Giordano kind of threw him into the deep end, so to speak, of the ocean. And Pozner says that writing the scripts for Aquaman themselves were among the most difficult things I've ever had to do. When I sit down to draw or to design, I enjoy the doing as much as I enjoy the results. But sitting down in front of the typewriter was never a pleasant experience. And as the series progressed, it became increasingly more difficult. I enjoyed the plotting and visually breaking down the story, but dreaded assembling all the information and putting it down in words, detailed panel descriptions, dialogue, captions. It was slow work, and I didn't feel terribly competent at it. But it all started coming together over a year and a half. Over a year and a half after making the proposal, I handed in the 4th script in July of 1984. Each script was read and discussed by Dick Giordano and several others whose opinions I value, most notably Paul Levitz, Klaus Janson, and Barry Marks. I'm not sure who Barry Marks is, but that's interesting. Each made suggestions that were incorporated into the final scripts. My attitude was that since I was learning, I was interested in and appreciative of any advice seasoned professionals could offer. The comments helped me to improve the story and taught me much about the medium. Okay, so that's so interesting that DC at this time was perfectly willing to hand off the reins of, arguably a flagship character. Okay, maybe more of like a B-level flagship character, but still a character that's been around for almost half a century at that point. And they're perfectly willing to hand off the reins to a newbie writer and a newbie artist to go just do a 4-issue miniseries, reimagine the origin, give him a new costume. I guess part of this, if we're honest here, part of this is it's freaking Aquaman. They're not going to hand Neal Pozner and 19-year-old Craig Hamilton the keys to Superman or Batman. But in this case, it's Aquaman. So I guess, all right, he's been around a half a century, but it's still Aquaman.
But here's the thing, though. But the thing that's interesting is that he said, so earlier on, he was like, he's talking about the thing with Dick Giordano, and he's like, he said to him, he said, we had a lengthy discussion. After, out of the blue, he told me, well, write it up and submit it. And he goes, what? I'm no writer. What are you blathering about? And he goes, what do you mean you're no writer? Dick replied, I read your outline and it's well written. The ideas you just discussed with me are some good plot springboards. Go ahead and try it. And so I get it. But see, I get the feeling. See, the thing you get the feeling a lot from when you read these letter columns the way it is. It's so, and we sort of got this when we did the interview with Steve Bissett. It's like, the comics, like, people would go to those offices and hang out.
Right.
It felt more like a clubhouse. Obviously, like, Klaus Janson is here giving them, like, notes on this script. And, it's like they're all kind of hanging out, giving you these stories. I mean, you hear these stories all the time. The story, I remember reading when, who's the Marvel guy? Jim Shooter died, right? And there was a great story from Dennis Cowan about how he got his first Marvel gig, and he explained he's just like I was just over there hanging out.
Yeah, you're right.
And like, hey, come over here. Let's go for a walk.
Yeah, when you hear about that a lot, you hear about the stories all the time back then, because it was such a small, small world in comics, and it was all New York based. And I think it was also another Dennis Cowan story years later. I think when he was at DC, I think part of the way he got the Question gig was they had another artist on the Question originally who dropped out. And I think similar thing, like Cowan was there visiting, talking about some other work, and they were just like, hey, come talk to Denny O'Neil for a second. We got a spot opened up on this new thing we're doing. It's like, you know, if you were there, right place, right time, they needed people to do stuff.
Yeah, you know, and I think it doesn't work that way now because it's so decentralized.
Right.
It gets so decentralized. And particularly, I remember there was someone was telling me one time they felt really, really sad when DC shut down their New York office and moved out to LA. Because everybody knew part of what made DC what it was, again, you're in New York, everyone is close to it, you know, you can get there fast. So, you know, in LA, man, like, it doesn't matter that building's over on the Warner Brothers lot. I mean, which is where it is, and you fucking live over in Santa Monica, like that's like, guess what? You're never going to the office unless you have to.
Right. Because you lose half a day in traffic on most days.
Or more.
Yeah.
You know, like give that whole day up. And so it's just kind of fun to read. I guess I'm just trying to romanticize it a little bit. I'm sure
I think we tend to do that. That's our whole show, Chris.
This game wasn't as cool as all that, but you know, but again, it's like, remember what you hear about, what's the guy's name, Neal Adams, with this continuity school, and like those guys were sharing art studios and stuff like that. Yeah. So again, that's something I don't think happens anymore now.
No, you don't get that kind of apprenticeship. I mean, we've heard so many artists talk about, like Trevor Von Eden was a young kid working, you know, helping out Neal Adams, kind of like, you know, looking over his shoulder, learning lessons from Neal Adams. And you know, you hear so many of the guys like at that time that were just all working in the same spaces. And yeah, it was kind of a beautiful thing, the camaraderie among the artists in particular, but also I guess the writers, you know, at the various companies themselves, people would cross paths just so much more. Yeah.
Okay. I got one last thing to read about
go for it.
It's Kirk Hamilton talking about these characters. He goes, a lot of comic characters can only be distinguished by their costumes. To change that, I based all my people on friends and celebrities. Aquaman is a cross between Buster Crabbe and GQ model Jeff Aquilon. Nuada is modeled after Glenn Close, and Bress is based on Grace Jones. Wow. You know, and if you think about the page you just mentioned about like the sisters, like the way she's peered in, that does sound like a Grace Jones.
It's got a very kind of rock and roll vibe to it. Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Then it says the mirror is Lucille Ball in her Star Wars.
That's crazy. The mirror is based on Lucille Ball. That is wild. Oh my God. That's so cool. That's actually really cool. And okay, one last thing that I wanted to pull from this text page are these, it's actually a really nice text piece Posner wrote here. It's 2 pages, a lot of great info here. Picking up from where he turned in the proposal and he was learning so much about the medium, this is where Posner talks about how Craig Hamilton came onto the project. Right. So he says the next step, which had been in discussion since the proposal was accepted, was finding the proper artist. I believe miniseries should be the place for creative people who don't want to commit themselves for whatever reason to a regular monthly book. It sounds like Posner would use that descriptor for himself, perhaps, from the rather arduous writing process he described, which is so interesting, too, because remember, the idea of a miniseries is a brand new idea at DC Comics at this time. They've literally just coined the phrase miniseries like a year or 2 prior. You know, it's become their trademark thing is the 4-issue miniseries. And I think Marvel's calling them limited series over, you know, across the street there. So they're trying to distinguish what they're doing, but they're all basically doing these miniseries type things for the first time. So this is kind of a new idea in mainstream American comics. These people should be drawn from outside the regular available talent pool. And the creative requirements of the artist for this series were difficult. I especially wanted an artist who could draw moody, romantic, Art Nouveau inspired fantasy. Wow, that's highly specific. Romantic Art Nouveau inspired fantasy. Good luck finding a mainstream superhero artist.
Yeah, but it's interesting that you mentioned, Alphonse Mucha.
Right. It's giving that. It's giving that vibe. Yeah, so you could see why he gravitated toward Craig Hamilton's art. And Posner goes on to say, there was a sensuality underneath the story that I felt it was very important to convey, and yet there was also a great deal of emotionalism and violence. After searching for close to a year, that's a pretty long artist search,
Well,
Yeah.
I know.
We found Craig Hamilton. Although he had never had a story published, it was clear he had a lot of potential. He and I spent much time going over storytelling concepts until we established a foundation for which we were both comfortable, or with which we were both comfortable. Craig started penciling the story close to 2 years after the proposal was first made. After all that time, I was starting to get a little tired of the project. But I love how honest Posner is. But every time a new page arrives in the mail, and he's talking about literally the mail, folks, as we heard in our Steve Bissett interview, those pages were coming in via FedEx. Every time a new page arrives, I'm revitalized by the energy that I see in the work. Finally, all those things that I described in words are here in pictures, and they sure are interesting pictures. I'm excited all over again, and I hope I can share that excitement with all of you. And so that's really cool to hear from Neal Pozner just behind the scenes, some of the details and how this all came together. And he goes on to give very nice, lengthy bios to all the creative team here, sharing a lot of the shine in this text page with his compatriots, his collaborators. And it's really cool that he kind of gives everyone their moment. And Hamilton also talks about how he was inspired to draw comics early on by Mike Grell and Mike Grell's Legion of Superheroes, which is kind of interesting to me. I guess I can see that a little bit. And then he says he started off learning by copying Mike Grell, which is so fascinating because I always think of Mike Grell as like, kind of low key, like a second rate Neal Adams on some level, or like a Neal Adams clone who doesn't quite have the skill set of Neal Adams. But it's interesting that Posner grew up copying Mike Grell, which is, it's really fascinating the way we see, like, we can track the influences of all these artists. And then, I'm sorry, not Posner. I said Posner. I meant Craig Hamilton. And then Hamilton also says he was influenced by Marshall Rogers, which is interesting. And I can kind of see that too, because, Marshall Rogers had such a detail intensive, but also kind of weird style.
Yeah.
Really cool details we're finding out about everyone here involved in the project. And so, having said all that, it's clearly a passion project for Posner and Hamilton. And now we can move on to issue 3, where we finally get our origins of Aquaman and his brother, and things start to get really, really good.
Yeah, this is when the book kind of like kicks up a notch. I mean, the cover. I remember this cover. See, what's crazy is that when I look at these covers now, I realize that I have issues 1, 3, and 4 as floppies. I never got issue 2. For some, I know this from looking at these covers, but I kind of love this cover for number 2. P.K. Russell did the inking on this too. Mm-hmm. It feels a little more. It feels very P.K. Russell.
It does. It does. He's really taken charge of these inks. I mean, but it looks beautiful, of course.
It looks great, and the way it's colored, like that green of them, and the way they use it's. I love when they do this. They never do this now anymore, where they use like the coloring to kind of like help tell depth like this, where it'd be like a green wash, then a purple wash, and then like the background behind Ocean Master, like it feels depth because you just. The solid colors.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Like they don't do this kind of like coloring, like whole kind of technique anymore. The computer color gives you a different kind of ability to do stuff. But I always thought this was kind of a cool, like methodology of coloring, which you couldn't do today still if you wanted, but it's really easy today. But they don't. So, but issue 3 is like, so now that, like Aquaman and Nuada are captured by Ocean Master, and he's like, what are you doing here? What are these games? What are these games? And he's like, oh, well, you know how much I don't like your ass. This is what he says. And he's like, let me tell you why. And he like punches the girl in the stomach real hard, which I thought was kind of like, wow, you beat up this woman. Okay, dude. Like I'm not. I mean, as much as I didn't like you before, now you're like you're putting out there.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. Ocean Master is brutal.
It's brutal, and so then he has this giant crab take them up north to his kind of fortress of solitude.
Very creepy looking crab. Looks very spider-like.
Yeah. And then as they're going, that's when Aquaman tells the story.
Which kind of, it's kind of convenient. Like he tells this big long story as they're on this journey. But you know what? Like I was here for it because it was so interesting. Like I was happy to hear it.
He's very interesting. I mean, like, like I knew this story from maybe the Secret Origins. We told this in one of those Secret Origin books, but obviously different art. But this is like done really well. It's told really
Yeah.
well. It's. I love this panel. I love this page 7, when like the way that their little seduction
Yeah,
dance
I
with the.
agree. I agree. That's a standout page. And I
Yeah,
feel
it's
like,
so good.
yeah, Hamilton to me in this issue, and particularly as the origin starts off, I feel like there's just more intentionality and confidence coming into the work. Like just the layouts and the thinking behind everything, just it all feels, yeah, it feels like he's really taken control of the series more visually. And yeah, these are some beautiful pages just kicking off the origin. Yeah, the kind of romance between Aquaman's parents and how so much of it's just conveyed silently and visually with
Yeah, that's all.
looks. Yeah,
That's all about. So I love all
terrific,
about it.
terrific storytelling.
And then the rest of it is, is Aquaman is born. But he's 2. He starts falls in the water. He can breathe in the water, and the dad's like, "What the hell's going on?"
Yeah.
What I find interesting is that they just find out that they don't. They live this very secluded like life, like a hermit.
Yeah.
I find kind of interesting. I find it weird because there's this one panel on page 9 when Arthur is like he's on the ground reading and the dad's watching, and the mom is looking out the window like she's wants more.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we should say, just to back up to the beginning of the origin here, that Aquaman's father is a lighthouse keeper, right? Like he's a guy who, yeah, he's a lighthouse keeper. And one night he sees a woman in the water and it's her arm. And he runs down and rescues her from the water. And he describes her as a vision from beyond. He pulls this woman out of the water. And then that's the woman on that particularly beautiful page we're talking about that he kind of nurses back to health, and then they silently start to fall in love with each other, and that becomes his wife. And so it's like he literally pulls a woman out of the ocean and falls in love with her. And they say that dad never really asks her about where she came from because, like, being a solitary person himself, dad never asked mom about her poignant moods or where she had come from that night. It's kind of amazing. Can you imagine pulling a woman out of the ocean and you never ask where she came from?
But you get a weird sense. You get a weird sense that it's like you find out somewhere later on this where it's like she's from Atlantis and she was in her exile because she wanted to visit the surface
Right,
people.
right.
But it's weird because that's why I read this panel where she's looking out the window. She's like pining for something because she's living this hermit life. She got, what I'm saying? So she's never really experiencing the people on the surface. It's kind of a interesting little thing. And then she dies, and they don't explain how she dies.
Mm-hmm.
And then when she dies, the dad is like heartbroken. And then it's this interesting thing where it says I love this thing where it's like, because the dad is living in a lighthouse, so he just can't be around people. He never want to be around people. But there's a great line where it's like, it's like it left the nights my father, who once needed and wanted no one, could not sleep alone now. Like the whole thing, it's like this woman kind of like just it opened. See, this is interesting work because it opened up his ability to feel like, I need human contact. I need this human intimacy.
Right. Once he had actually been with this other woman.
Experienced it, and then he meets another woman in town who's just a little dowdy. They get married. They have a kid. That kid is Orm. He's probably like 10 or 15 years younger than Aquaman at this point. And he's just looked at as like a damn, it's this great line where it's like, the boy and the mother were both so inferior, so average. And then Orm is saying, I proved to be, as Arthur Curry's saying, I proved to be dad's escape from the mediocrity of the normal. So you get this sense of this is why that the brothers don't like each other.
Right. And he says earlier, before his Atlantean mother dies, Arthur, aka Aquaman, Arthur says that he inherited his mom's ability to breathe water. I think it's supposed to be breathe underwater. And
breathe.
Yeah, and to communicate with marine life. And then it's, her deathbed confession where she reveals she's really from Atlantis. So it's a pretty fucking cool origin about how Aquaman came to be. And I just want to call out the visuals here again with Craig Hamilton stepping up his game. These flashbacks, you'll notice on the first 3 pages of flashbacks, Chris, that Craig Hamilton has like all these really original panel borders. And as we start the panel borders for the flashback pages, on the first page, it's water. Like there's like bubbling water that is the panel border on that first page of the flashback. Yeah. And then it kind of culminates, I think, in a bit of a seashell in the bottom left corner. And then, and then there's another seashell on the corner. Actually, one seashell in the corner of the second flashback page, different seashell. And again, it's kind of like a fluid, watery outline. And a third seashell at the bottom of that second page. So he's using water and seashells to actually border the pages and the panels. And then the third page, again, you've got similar kind of liquidy or non-existent panel borders, and then a giant seashell. And it kind of reminds me of stuff that Todd McFarlane did early on in his career, where he did these really unusual page designs where you'd have just like random objects sitting outside the panel, where McFarlane did that on like Infinity Inc. for DC Comics, where McFarlane's actual drawing skill was pretty shaky, but the page designs were just wild with stuff like this. So Hamilton's kind of combining this with some more skillful drawing, frankly, and some really artful panel designs. And then on this, what is this fourth page of the flashback where the mom is dying, the panel borders for the entire page are his mother's hair, which is brilliant. I mean, it's just beautiful. This feels like absolutely like, later we would say this is some J.H. Williams III type shit. I mean, this is just really beautiful. And it kind of reminds me also of, the way another one of our CRYB favorites, Larry Stroman, would draw this wild hair on his women characters. It's not exactly the same, but it kind of evokes that kind of looking at hair as almost a design element, and more so than just physical hair. The hair becomes part of the design, and it's just really creative storytelling. So I just wanted to call that out.
No, it's fantastic. I mean, it's all really, really great, but then what's interesting is when the mom is dead, the panel bordering now becomes a lot more traditional.
It does. You're right.
A lot more now, like like back to the average, the inferior, the mediocre.
That's such a good point. You're right. It becomes a lot more drab in a way.
Exactly. Except for when like the boy, and then the rest of it is now like stuff about Orm as like he's a delinquent, and he's never getting his just due from, like this, like Aquaman obviously reminds the father of his wife, and he's like this protean child. And then, and then it cuts back to the modern day. He explains how he like found some weapons underground cities that enabled him to breathe underwater.
Orm did,
and to plot the death of Aquaman. So now we have this origin story of Ocean Master, which is really fascinating. It's all happening like when they're going up to the up north with this giant crab, and then it turns to ice, and then we're at the place where we're at this little like, again, like a fortress of solitude that Orm was created to kind of like, it's I guess it's out of these crystals, and then that's where Aquaman and Orm kind of have another fight, and he's not there. I kind of thought it was weird. It's like he's there talk to them, but then the next panel he's like out with his minions, and they're like, and he's collecting more crystals.
That is odd. And that Fortress of Solitude type place that Orm is living, we have to say it's a full page spread when Aquaman arrives there with the silver arm lady, and that's a hell of a page where you see that ice, castle, and he's got like I'm just noticing this now. He's got like an ice sculpture gargoyle on like, on one of the top corners of like one of the spires of his castle here. It's really beautiful, beautiful design work by Craig Hamilton. And you see like the shafts of light penetrating the ice, of like this ice structure, this cathedral made of ice that Orm is living in. Just really just gorgeously designed villain lair.
No, it's fantastic. But then like when we see him, he's stealing this. So when it didn't make sense to me when I was reading it, but at the end of it all going to make sense is that like Orm he's two places at once. So he's killing some of these people from Atlantis, and he's stealing so we can steal the crystal here, and then he's also there in the North, the Force of Solitude, with Aquaman and with Nawada, and they get and these and Orm uses magic to keep him to hold him back, He tells him just like a little bit more about his plan, which I think is the worst thing for any villain to do, is to tell the plan.
Yeah.
It's to Goldfinger. And he's like, hey, so I found this information about using these crystals, and you get back to the story with the guy named Arion, all that kind of stuff like that. But then, but then there's this great moment when he shows the crystal from the talisman, to Leah Fail, the thing that Volko was after, and he goes, I have them all. I have all these crystals. These are these powers that I'm using, so that like I can just cause all this havoc. And then, and then he gets in a fight with Aquaman, and they battle, and Aquaman just like beats him up and beats him, and and he's like, you'll never. He's just like, he's like, you idiot! I'll wipe that smug smile off your face. And this is when like the angry Aquaman, I guess, is showing his head again, where he's sort of mad. He's like, these bonds can never stop me, and neither will you. And he's like, oh, do tell. And they get in this big fight, and then ultimately he disappears.
Right.
And then and what the woman realizes, I guess they sell in the next issue, is that Orm was using the anger from Aquaman's anger, his hatred or his anger toward him, to power up the crystals, which I think is kind of
it's really cool. Super cool.
Really cool. I mean, and this is the point where it's like, oh, the Forces of Solitude is now like in trouble, and she's like, you got to figure this out, dude. It seems your friend Aquaman you see your brother was never really here. And then he's like, but who is it I hit, And then she like realizes, oh yeah, that's the end of this issue. Yeah. And so it's kind of interesting what happened here. Like you get this is what I kind of feel. So this issue is so fascinating to me because it kind of sets the emotional stakes of these two characters in a way that, that like I didn't know before, but also the way the story's designed, that they're using like your emotional energy to fuel these magic crystals. And the woman, Nuada, later on, like she says, that's how sorcery works. Like sorcery is not like science, which is all logical. Sorcery like is powered off emotions. And I kind of think it's what makes the fourth issue so fascinating, is that like she figures out you have to use your emotions because to defeat your brother. And then and they start having this conversation, and then he realizes that like he's like emotionally blocked. Like his whole life he's emotionally blocked. He never had to deal with his own emotions about himself or his brother.
Yeah.
And that so it almost feels like a therapy session that she puts him through so Aquaman can defeat Ocean Master. And I thought that was a really fascinating kind of storytelling choice device, because it feels like, like obviously this kind of like talk therapy and everything like that, psychoanalysis had been around for whatever, like Freud was maybe the 1920s, so at least 60, 70 years. But I don't think I've ever seen it been used in a comic like that.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, that's a fascinating thing that Pozner is doing here with Hamilton. It's sort of a uncommonly psychologically astute sort of storytelling, and tapping into like all these familial issues and family traumas and how they affect a hero, and all this repressed emotion and trauma needing to be expressed to like work through things. No, you're right. This is not the kind of thing that most superhero comics, certainly in the 1980s, would use to resolve the story and the conflict. It's like, this is definitely like where I think we see the real ambition of this storytelling. And yeah, Posner and Hamilton have built up to quite an incredible issue 4. And you're right, it's kind of incredible in terms of the concept, writing wise, as you just described. And then Hamilton really delivers by just knocking it out of the park, as we were saying, visually. Like, it's just like they both really come to play in this fourth issue, and it feels like they're doing everything they can to end the series with a bang. And this is what they've been building up to.
Huge, like, I mean, like on page 6,
yeah,
when Ocean Master appears at that other the other underwater kingdom where they're black and they don't speak the same language.
Yeah.
Like when he appears, and just pops out of nowhere. Like, that's really cool. See, here's where he solved the dematerialization, that he didn't have it in issue, whatever.
Yeah.
Why is it here? He's figured it out, like he.
Are you looking at the bottom of 5 and then top of 6?
No. I'm talking about the top of 6. At the top of 6, when he appears, when you see, like he's almost at the smokes around.
Totally. If you look at the bottom of 5 too, the bottom of 5, he's dematerializing, and his cape, his cape's kind of, it's like he's using the horizontal lines, and the cape is disappearing, but there's also kind of like a white color hold all around the cape. So and then he pops in and he's got the smoke. Yeah, you're right. It's like, this is where it looks intentional. The dematerializing, the rematerializing. Yeah, it looks like they solved that problem. And this is just one example here, kind of a little microcosm of how this visual approach by issue 4 is finally starting to fire on all cylinders. And this is by far the most beautiful issue of the run. I mean, really, just by far, it's like, it's not even close. Like, this fourth issue is really where you see Craig Hamilton and Joe Orlando like really clicking visually, and you can see why at the end of this series. Apparently, there was real demand for a sequel, and DC Comics, they greenlit a sequel to this miniseries. They were going to do a sequel, and from all reports, Craig Hamilton was unable to finish the art because he was just too drained from everything he had put into this first series. And they tried to get him to turn around and draw a second series, pretty much right away. And I think he said he got about 5 pages into it. And he said that those 5 pages were beautiful and they were better than anything in the previous series, and that he really felt like he'd leveled up, but he just didn't have enough gas in the tank. Inspiration wise, he felt like he was spent and he just couldn't do it. And DC they took the project away, they canned it, and they had greenlit it though. They wanted to do a sequel, but Hamilton himself just could not finish the art, and then they bailed on it. And then when they did kind of bring Aquaman back, DC took like a weird step backwards, and they brought in Kurt Swan, the old Superman artist, to take over for the next chapter of Aquaman after this really progressive, wild, psychedelic art, from Craig Hamilton, to then go back to Kurt Swan just sounds so nonsensical and just dopey corporate think. I don't even know how that happened, but that was a big step backwards. Then of course, they ditched the new suit in short order, and so this became this weird sort of aberration in the Aquaman mythos. So I'm glad we're talking about this here, because I know this series is kind of a cult classic, and a lot of people have a lot of love for it. But it's crazy how they took such a big swing, and they were in large part so successful. And I think a lot of people really love this costume and love this take on the character. But then, sadly, Pozner passed away. Hamilton left comics. And then this series became like a weird footnote in Aquaman lore. But, it's a shame, because there's obviously there's so much cool stuff in here.
Well, I mean, to me, I like, what page is this? This page 9. Like, she pulls all together. She's like, "Hey, you must come in touch with your full range of feelings you blocked with your anger all your life." And then she says, "Only the emotional richness. Oh no, only this emotional richness will provide me with the eldritch material I need to break your brother's hold over the crystals." And he's like, "What? You can't be serious." Because I can't possibly change so much so quickly. I'm just not built like that. I've lived my whole life one way, and to change at this point, I need. And then he's crying. He's like, "Help!"
This really is a therapy session, isn't it?
Which is why I kind of was like, and then he's on the ground, like at her feet, crying. And it's like, and she's like, "For understanding the self is the key to understanding and using magic." And it's and the next thing you know, like Ocean Master, he's pulled some city from the deep to like kind of crush the surface.
Yeah.
And then the woman puts together this little pentagram type thing, and she's like, "Okay, I want you to get in here." And then and then she sends him to fight ocean master on the astral plane. And this is when the book becomes like unbelievably amazing.
This is so wild, man. This is so wild. And this was coming out right at the same time as that Dead Man miniseries we talked about, where also like half of that miniseries took place in the astral plane and then in the mythical city of Nanda Parbat, where they were like, Dead Man was going in and out of the astral plane. This is like a very psychedelic / metaphysical time at DC Comics where, like these characters were being pushed into such interesting directions, man. Like this is just so fascinating for a superhero comic to be like, our final battle is a psychological showdown between two brothers on the astral plane to resolve their family trauma.
Yeah, I mean, it's like it's fantastic because I'm gonna tell you, at the time, all this kind of like the current era's like talk about self-love and positivity and the use of the word of trauma, like all that wasn't even part of like the lexicon back then.
Nope.
So that's why, to me, reading this now is like, it's such a fascinating kind of like precursor. Like if this came out now, I don't think it would be that people are like, okay, yeah, sure. Okay, whatever,
Right.
But at this time, and like, so he wrote this in 1984, right?
Yeah.
This idea and he's touching on something that like hadn't really been in comics. And then these three these 3 2-page spreads over the next 6 pages are so fascinating because the top is like them battling the astral plane, and then the bottom is sort of like Aquaman, like it's like his journal for his own kind of like psychic kind of like what it's like he's peeling back his own onion.
This is like amazing work. I mean, it's really glorious, like beautiful storytelling. Like it's just, good. I mean, only thing I can compare it to really, I keep saying J.H. Williams III, but it really does remind me of those Promethea double page spreads, where it would be like a collage and just so epic as you're kind of like spiraling like through, these crazy worlds. Like this is just, I mean, it really is stunning and very ahead of its time. Comics did not look like this, in the mainstream at this time. Although you mentioned, Chris, I don't know if this was on the show or before we recorded, but you mentioned Jim Starlin and like some of Starlin's work that was a bit psychedelic and sprawling.
There's like, I've got to remember like when he was doing Captain Marvel or even Warlock, there was a little, but those books weren't that popular. Like people know Warlock and they know Captain Marvel. But Captain Marvel got more famous, I think, when they did the Death of Captain Marvel.
Right.
That kind of obviously is a graphic novel, but that whole kind of version, like, oh my God, you're killing a character that we know is around, and because when you think about like Rick Jones, who I'm surprised never showed up in the Marvel movies, but it's like, but Rick Jones I'm sure was the guy behind the Hulk, but he's really the guy with the negabands, and it was sort of like this. I mean, I think he's like a C-level character, Captain Marvel, because like the male version of Captain Marvel, which I think is, but I was at that, I mean, look, I love all the cosmic stuff, and it made sense to do it as cosmic stuff because with cosmic storytelling, then you can kind of break these panels in a way. It reminds me a little bit too of some of the early, the Ditko work that he did on Doctor Strange and Strange Tales, will sort of do these kind of like psychedelic stuff. But he does, but that was just more like because he's fighting people in like the dark dimension and shit like that. This is used as a therapy session, like you were saying earlier. It's like it's this kind of thing where it's looking back through his history. He's trying to figure out where like here's where I was not the best person that I could.
Yeah, it does read like a psychedelic drug trip into the psyche and the history of Arthur Curry. And it's interesting that Pozner really is ahead of the curve with a lot of the stuff he's kind of dabbling in here. It's also like really interesting that he's got this magical race of like, Atlantean adjacent beings where this woman, the Silver Arm woman, she's like created this giant pentagram and she's like, come now, enter the pentagram, Aquaman. And that's like his doorway into this other world for the trip. And this is like interesting too, because it's like Aquaman's getting into these very occult / satanic adjacent realms. Yeah. And it's like, this is wild. Like we're in this kind of Aleister Crowley, occult magic being spelled with a CK, which is the way Aleister Crowley spelled it, and doing all this kind of crazy satanic shit. Like this is just wild that this is being used as the Aquaman climax for this miniseries, that all of a sudden Aquaman's dealing in this kind of occult realm of magic and darkness and psychedelic voyaging. This is some really ahead of its time shit. And they were clearly pushing boundaries. And again, props to DC Comics in the 80s and all the upper management for supporting work like this, from Dick Giordano to Paul Levitz and Joe Orlando to, of course, Jeanette Kahn, Jeanette Kahn running the show and being completely okay with this level of experimentation. It really is what made the 80s so much fun at DC Comics. And this is a prime example of that. I can't believe what they went for in this issue, man. This is genuinely just freaking crazy stuff.
I mean, like I said, I don't have to sit offline, but maybe I think I was reading, I was kind of like, okay, this is like sort of run of the mill comic, whatever, blah blah blah. But these last two issues were like so, I mean, and also to me now, like reading it now, like like I personally had like a lot of strife with my brother, so I kind of like this kind of like resonates in a different way with me. But it also like look at it like. I see like the way these pages are constructed, where he's got the zodiac crystals running across the top, not the top, but they're dividing the what's going on in the astral plane to what's going on like underneath him. And what's kind of cool here's what's kind of cool too, right? That you notice this part. So if you go to the first page of that, they're fighting in the astral plane. Okay, like you see, it's like, so the astral plane is like it's going for it's the full panel, like to where the crystals are, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then the next page, once like Aquaman begins to get the upper hand on Orm, that little border begins to break and becomes white and gets bigger and bigger.
Oh, you're right. Yes.
Across, and it's sort of breaking their kind of like energy together. And then in the final page, when it goes across, it's like, and he's like, stop, like when he's beating like Ocean Master down, like it's a full break where you see, the astral plane is now being shattered, and then the next page is like you see it getting shattered. He's like, what are you doing? And it's like, and that's the end of Ocean Master. He goes, what have you done? And it's all, so that little energy that I guess that Nuada was controlling is now broken the astral plane thing. And then you see these guys kind of like the pages sort of change and feel different. And then he finally says, like, my brother, I know why I'm feeling this way. It's because I love you.
So great. Like this is this is amazing. It says like, I know Nuada, he's reminiscing at the very end of the trip here. I can remember my only childhood playmate, the only person I knew other than my parents, far into adolescence, my sole comrade. I remember coming to his aid. I was concerned. I cared. Yes, Arthur, the real feelings under the competition, the anger, the feelings you hid because of your father and because you did not feel them returned. Why, I know that feeling. Orm, Curry, Marius, brother, I love you. And that's where you turn the page and Arthur's like splayed on the pentagram, and it's a full page spread of everything exploding and shattering. And it's like, Artie! Ah!
Yeah, well, that's what's his name.
Oh, no, you're right. That's Orm. That's Orm.
Yeah, that's Orm.
Right, yeah. You're right. Of course, he's yelling, Artie! Yeah. And it's hilarious that he calls him Artie the whole time, too. That made me laugh a lot. But yeah, you're right. So Orm is like shattered by that I love you moment. And then it's like Arthur returns from the astral plane. And I mean, what an ending to that sequence. It's just really emotional and really intense.
It feels a little, it feels too mature for the time.
Yeah, I could see that. Yeah, it's
too mature for the time. I think it's again, it's like, his whole method was, how do I make Aquaman a more relevant character? How do I make him like not be the third fiddle? I mean, because you think about like he's, and Mike Grell did sort of the same thing with the Longbow Hunters with Green Arrow to make him more of like, not, I don't want to say a joke character, but they weren't the heavy hitter characters. And this did such a good job in like repositioning Aquaman. And it's what you said about how they wanted a sequel and it failed. I mean, if for all these creative reasons and Neal Pozner's untimely death,
Right.
but it's like, but you feel like these guys were. It's just like I said again, if he wrote this in '84, we really don't see this type of like introspective storytelling in mainstream superhero comics really till later.
Yeah,
So, like,
no, we really don't. I mean, you get it later, but you get it really from a lot of the leading lights in comics. Like you get, Grant Morrison doing some very sort of introspective storytelling with Buddy Baker as Animal Man later on. You certainly get Alan Moore doing it in Swamp Thing. But yeah, it's, you don't get a lot of this stuff in terms of like this real psychological kind of like meditation in superhero storytelling, where these people feel like real people, and I just think you're right. It's brilliant. It's very ahead of its time, and it's a shame that it's the only thing that Posner ever wrote, but I'm glad he did, because this is just a hell of a unique series and just such an interesting, fascinating moment in DC history. This 4-issue series, but I feel like it made a real impact in all of our memories. And one thing we skipped over that I wanted us to read that we should just go back to quickly is the letter column for issue 3 features a letter from the legendary letterhack T.M. Maple, who is, I believe, certainly, I think, the most legendary letterhack in the history of comics. I think he published thousands of letters and also died an untimely death. T.M. Maple, who I believe was Canadian, and his real name, I think, was Jim Burke. I think he passed away at the age of like 38 or 39, but by that time he'd had over 2,000 letters published, I think, in like every comic under the sun. He wrote like a letter a day, and most of them seemed like they were published. Wow. But I just remember as a kid, every other letters page had a letter from T.M. Maple. And, you remember that. So here, I just wanted to read his letter he wrote in on the very first issue of Aquaman. That might be kind of a cool final thing to note here. So he says, "Dear Bob, thanks for the advanced copy of Aquaman #1. And say, it can't be just called Aquaman, can it? Doesn't it have to have a different name, like the Sword of Aquaman or the Shadow War of Aquaman? Say, both of those kind of fit, don't they?" I think that's a little joke about the Shadow War of Hawkman that had just come out.
And the Sword of the Atom.
And the Sword of the Atom. That's right. Yeah. So he's making a little joke about their miniseries titles. The first couple of pages made me think that you might have mistakenly sent me an issue of Arion, Lord of Atlantis, which we were talking about. But not, I'm afraid, one of my favorites. But it soon became clear that this would tie in with Aquaman, probably in relation to Tir Na Og. Oh, so Tir Na Og, that magical city, I guess that's drawing from the Arion mythos.
Yes.
Okay. See, I didn't know that either because I also never read Arion. Arian, or however you say that. And actually, I'm not too happy at the use of magic, if such it be, here, since I feel that Aquaman has always operated best in scientific/adventure type situations. There is enough that is weird and wonderful about Aquaman and his surroundings without bringing in the sometimes rather arbitrarily exercised power of magic. I guess this move is part of trying to tie together the various aspects of Atlantis, past and present, and I'm not too sure that's a good idea either. As we can see, T.M. Maple is nothing if not opinionated. This guy's got opinions for days, but, that's why we love him. So he goes on to say, instead of having several interesting, distinctive, and vital societies, if somewhat difficult to explain and reconcile, you might very well end up with a rather bland mishmash, creating an indistinct, unexciting, and imprecise whole. This miniseries would never have that complete an effect, but it is part of a trend to watch out for. All the above is not to say that I didn't like several aspects of the issue, far from it. The changes in Orm and the threat he now represents, while enigmatic, are intriguing. The idea of Atlantis rebelling against Aquaman's too quick changes and his lack of understanding that this was indeed a problem is a good one on which to hang much further development. It's also a situation which occurs very frequently in the real world, in quotes. For instance, there has been backlash against modernization in any number of countries, not excluding our own, and for him that would be Canada. How many times have you heard someone say that life would be or was simpler and better without computers or robots or TV or music videos or nuclear weapons or whatever? It's hard for me to judge Aquaman's new costume just from the photocopy, because he was sent an advanced copy with no color apparently. But in black and white, it seems a little too subdued and detailed. His old costume was simple yet dynamic, bright, and appropriate. Still, I'll have to give the new one a chance and get a look at it in color. Also, if all that Aquaman did to disguise himself was put on a new costume, I must question the effectiveness of this as a disguise. His face was still quite visible, though I admit he has only been seen at a distance by his fellow citizens so far. I mean, when you wear a set of clothes for the first time, do your friends fail to recognize you when you walk into the room? Hey, I didn't recognize you, Bob. Is that a new shirt? Finally, glad to see that Mira will have at least some role to play in this miniseries. She's too often ignored and also mistreated. We'll see about that. Now, all I have to do is hunker down and wait those several months for issue number 2. The anguish of being a letterhack of note. Signed TM Maple, and the response to the Mad Maple, which is actually what that stands for. TM stands for the Mad Maple. The response to him is this: I've never been a great fan of the science fiction elements in Aquaman, since they made the strip too much like Adam Strange for my tastes. Now, I love Adam Strange, but I'd much rather focus on the things that make Aquaman unique. And no matter how you look at it, historically and cross-culturally, water is linked to mysticism. Add this to the mythic roots of the Atlantis legend, and a magical/mythological approach seemed the most natural to me. One aspect of current Atlantis, as I see it, is that because of the isolation of each community for so many centuries and their cultural differences, even before the continent sank, each society is radically different. Tritonus and Poseidonus, long established as coexisting, are certainly different from one another, as are Tierra Neog or Mirzon. As for Aquaman appearing in the new costume, he's only been seen at a distance by Atlanteans at this point, who know that he hasn't had a change in clothes for over 40 years. Good thing this uniform, the uniform is wash and wear. Up close, certainly, the new costume would be an ineffective disguise. Okay, so that appears to be Neal Pozner, I believe himself, responding with a spirited defense of his own decisions to go with magic as part of the mythos for Atlantis and the new Aquaman series. And, you know, man, this is one of those things that I always love whenever we look at these old letter columns, is like, I love the writers printing the hostile and or critical letters and then responding and engaging with those critiques, just like we saw in Nexus with Mike Barron responding to Harlan Ellison and his critique, you know, and like Barron was like, nah, actually, Harlan, you know what, you're wrong about this and this and this. Like, I love this shit. Like, it's so cool to see the writers just get in there and mix it up and either defend themselves or maybe, you know, give a little ground. But like, I really miss that kind of community in the letter column, and it's great to see that here. It's just so much fun.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and it gives you just gives you some cool insight. So there you go. I don't know. Do we have anything else to say about Aquaman?
No, I will say one last thing. Look, I love revisiting this. You know, like I said, it's interesting because I remember seeing the last page of this on page issue 4. It's an epilogue where we think that Ocean Master's destroyed, gone, but you see his arm rise out of the rubble, and he goes, Artie.
Oh yeah, right.
And his hand just drops down, and you don't know if he's dead or not, but you obviously know that he wasn't like destroyed, like atomized by what happened. And so I think that's kind of an interesting way. So obviously, it's like, okay, where's the sequel? You know, that's a horror movie kind of ending.
Yes, totally.
You know, but overall, I mean, look, you know, this is a great thing. I'm glad we revisited it. You said it before. It's tragic. This was like Posner's only work. And what's his name didn't do much work either after this. But it's such a, you know, it's like to go back and look at something that had clearly this book had impact on other people. it's so just too much going on, particularly in this last issue, that I just think that other comic artists must have been like, "What the fuck, man? It's time I'm gonna step up my game."
Yeah, man. I mean, you're right. It's wild. So many of these artists that we look at on the show that were really pushing things were shockingly young, like with Trevor Von Eden on Thriller and Green Arrow. You know, he was in his 20s, I think, like early 20s, you know, working on those books. And then here we have another guy, like barely 20 years old, just really pushing the envelope on mainstream comic book storytelling. Like, I mean, these young guys were given a lot of latitude, at least, you know, in some respects at DC Comics, to go pretty wild in the 80s.
Yeah, which is crazy.
Yeah, it's really great to see. It's really, really cool. So yeah, I'm glad we looked at this, because I think, like you, I had some of these issues, and I think I read some of it back in the day, but I did not remember this at all.
No. I mean, I don't remember it at all. I do remember, you know, it's funny. I think about it. I do remember the final page. I remember that. And I do remember some of this battle, but I don't think when I read this as a kid, I understood what this whole astral plane and the thing about loving my brother.
You're like, what?
No, I'm not saying I didn't love my brother, but I'm saying, but it's like the power of that and the hatred of like going for so long and like not, you know, that rift, what it meant. And, you know, like, I mean, that means more to me now, because I didn't have that then. I do have that now, and I kind of get it more. But I just think, I look at it as like, this is a really strong, like smart, clever, pushing the envelope type of storytelling for a superhero comic. Now, look, you know, like we did Concrete a while back, and look, I could see how Concrete is going to be like delving into the mental scape of that guy who's stuck in the thing and all that little origin story of him, but not in this. And also, we never really looked at Aquaman as being this type of like deep character, you know. So that's what I really appreciate what was done here. And again, like I said, it wasn't until Peter David picked it up, I think maybe 10 years later, that, because the next miniseries is not done by him, it was later on. I can't remember who did the art on that. I want to see who did the art on that, but because I remember it was really cool. That, you know, that we got a chance to see Aquaman in a different light, because that's when he had the beard and everything like that.
Right.
Also was like somewhat controversial, but you know, yeah. But you know, I mean, I thought this was a really good, you know, like a good like story. You know, good just to come back and see it again. I was like, wow, like I didn't know this is what people did. You know.
Yeah, no, it's very cool, man. I love this era of DC Comics so much. This is my favorite single era of comics from any company ever, is just DC in the mid 80s. Like, I would be happy as a clam covering the entire DC line in the 80s, because as we're looking through this, I see the ads for the Fury of Firestorm, Blue Devil, which we've already covered, and I know like the Captain Atom reboot was coming out around this time. Like, there's just so much cool shit coming out of DC. Like, it's just an amazing time. So much fun. Really, really fun comics. So yeah, this is great. So thank you everybody for listening to this little stroll down memory lane like we do here on Comics Rot Your Brain. And if you haven't signed up to be a member yet for our channel, we've got some great bonus episodes and an ever-growing library of members-only bonus episodes. Many hours of content there that's stacking up. So if you want some extra bonus episodes and you want to throw a few bucks a month toward our way, we would very much appreciate it. So please sign up to be a member. And we got lots of very cool members-only bonus stuff that's going to be coming up later this year. You're not going to want to miss.
All right, everyone. Thanks for listening, and we will talk sooner than later.
Yeah,
or not talk.
We will.
We'll be back with another episode.
We'll be talking about comics more soon.